married in 1962. We were engaged. Louise spent a short part of her childhood in Des Moines, Iowa, and when our engagement was announced in the Des Moines Register, I received a letter from Mr. Donald Purvis, Alice Chalmers' agent in Des Moines, saying, "My name's Purvis, your name's Purvis, are we related?" And I didn't know if we were related, I didn't know much about the family. But at the same time, a cousin had died at home, and father had inherited all her possessions. Amongst them was a couple of pages of Purvis family stuff, which mentioned our little branch of the family, and a few sort of things like Hawaii and Sumatra, and America, and Virginia, and whatever.
Australia.
And Australia. A lot of us Portugal, Australia. And so I set off trying to find out. Louise resented these $10 checks that I had to send off to Sydney, Australia to get death certificates and things for various cousins and people. Finally, after 54 years, we've ended up with this thing, which is, let's say, about 5,500 names. Heaven knows how many living people can contact. A whole lot of other Purvis families, which I don't know that are related at all, but they may be in distance. People like Melvin Purvis, who shot Dillinger, and these sort of people like that. Huey Purvis, we've now discovered, is our new discovery in Vicksburg and his family. So we've still established a lot of contact. Anyway, your particular interest, this our direct family. I haven't gone further back from what this little bit of paper had at the beginning. I've only come down the way to see where it all went to. Anyway, this was this Alexander Purvis, who died in 1694. He was a tenant farmer on a farm in the north of England, in Northumberland, just south of the Scottish border. And he had some children, one of which was John, and his son was a John. Now, John married an Elizabeth Thompson. He died. He wasn't a highly successful sheep farmer. His sheep all died of foot rot. But anyway, his wife, Elizabeth, was an extremely tough lady. And one of his elder brothers, there were three brothers, he was the youngest of three, she went where the eldest brother had a farm up in Scotland by this time, near Dunfermline, just north of Edinburgh, and rented other farms. And she lived up there with her 7 sons. She had 7 sons. And educated them all at Dunfermline High School, which in Scotland, thanks to John Knox and the Presbyterian Reformation, John Knox's thing was that every parish must have a church and a school, and every Scottish child must learn how to read and write and have an education. And so as a result, there was a good education standard in Scotland. All these 7 boys were well educated, but only one was going to inherit the farm in Scotland, and that was going to be Thomas. All the rest were going to have to go and make their own way in the world, and they all did. I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, Thomas, just interestingly, because it does redound on just nearby here, just up the road in Mississippi, had a daughter, Helen. Her husband, she married a John Bruce, who ran a distillery, a Scotch whiskey distillery, which wasn't a great financial success, and actually brought that family to some financial disaster. But they had a daughter Anne, was their eldest, and the 7th child was a Thomas Bruce, comes to that later. Of the 7 children, the sons, the 7th was this Burridge Purvis. He had a son called John. Anne married John. First cousin once removed. And not only that, but this Robert, which is your ancestor, had by this time come to America, had owned bits of land hereabouts in Mississippi. He made a fortune in cotton somehow. He'd gone back to Scotland and back and forth and so on. Anyway, he had these little bits of land in Mississippi. John bought these bits of land from Robert and formed a plantation called Oaklands, which is up Route 3 towards Yazoo City. And this is what Huey's been investigating for me, several years. We've got it. So here we have Anne and John married with Oakland's plantation, which they now were living on, and they hired the seventh brother as their overseer, who oversaw this plantation. This was going to cause a lot of trouble because Anne and John died childless, and there were various heirs and nephews and things who were going to inherit it. But Thomas Bruce was here as the overseer, living here in Mississippi, just up the road. Then the Civil War came, 1863. This plantation was up the road from Vicksburg, was invaded by the US federal troops. The whole place was destroyed. Thomas Bruce went off to New Zealand to outlive the war, where various cousins were living. And the place was derelict for 2 or 3 years. And then in 1866, the heirs, one of the heirs, tried to come back and re-establish the plantation at Oaklands, was promptly murdered by a band of freed slaves, one of which was then executed in Vicksburg at Bob Brick's railroad yard under the date, and it's all recorded in the Vicksburg newspaper. So anyway, then Thomas Bruce, who came back from New Zealand, and said, I'm going to do John's estate in the chaos of the Restoration just after the Civil War. And he managed to prove, in looking at this, that he was actually owed $12,000, and the property was only worth $8,000. Therefore, he insisted on the sheriff selling the place, putting it up for auction. It was auctioned for $7,000 to Thomas Bruce, who was the only bidder. The heirs then sued him for doing this wrongfully, put it up for sale again, and this time, this time
sounds like a perfect fit for our family.
This time the bid was $19,000, but the only bidder again was Thomas Bruce. So Thomas Bruce ended up as the owner of Oaklands, and he and his family then owned it until 1902, when his actually granddaughter and daughter, one daughter, not the same line, but a daughter and a granddaughter, who owned it, and they sold it in 1902 to Mr. Jacob Dornbush, who I presume is an ancestor, and Huey may be able to tell us this, it was the ancestor of the present owner, who's Albert Dornbush, up at Oaklands, or it's also called Broadlands or something like that up there. Yes. Anyway, up the Route 3 towards, yes. Anyway, that's a little diversion to show you that there is, they owned, so they were here from 1830. They started out the Oaklands property in 1834 or 5 until 1902. Anyway, just quickly to run through the other brothers, we go back to them. William was the second brother. He's sort of interesting. He, and very controversially, I suppose, I have to be a little careful. They were all in South, 4 of them went to South Carolina. William, John, Alex, and Burridge went to South Carolina. And William, he didn't marry, but he had my beloved friend, Harriet Judah. Harriet Judah was the daughter of a Jewish Frenchman called Judah, and the daughter of a freed slave. A beautiful girl, apparently, who had been captured at age 12 in Morocco, brought here to South Carolina as a slave, sold at the Charleston slave market, bought by this very kindly matron lady in Charleston, who was quite elderly and died not long after, and left her freedom in her will. So she was a freed slave girl. They had 3 sons. The eldest son died relatively young, age 21. The second son, Robert, who passed for white, but was in fact of mixed blood, became one of the arch abolitionists, one of the most extreme abolitionists. Several books, appears in several books. They moved to Philadelphia. He was president of the Underground Railroad in Pennsylvania. Some 3,000 slaves, free slaves, passed through his homes in Philadelphia and thereabouts. And his eldest son, I think his eldest son, yes, was one of the first black doctors, because he married a free black person in Philadelphia.